What if I told you that one of the most dominant MotoGP World Champions of the modern era is now fighting just to finish in the points? That a rider who once conquered the premier class without winning a single race until the very end is now struggling to even make it to the finish line. This is the story of Joan Mir, a champion whose career reads like a Hollywood script, complete with an incredible rise, an against-all-odds championship victory, and what many are calling one of the most dramatic falls from grace in MotoGP history. Joan Mir's journey began in the most unforgiving way possible. While other kids his age were playing video games, 16-year-old Mir was carrying the weight of his family's financial future on his shoulders in the Red Bull MotoGP Rookies Cup. "I remember that my dad, we didn't have the money to pay a team," Mir would later reflect. "I had to build that skills and that talent from zero. If I was able to win in one championship, then the other championship and one team can say, okay, try here." This wasn't just racing, this was survival. Every race weekend was a job interview. Every mistake could end his career before it even began. In 2013, his first year in the Rookies Cup, Mir showed flashes of brilliance but finished 9th overall. The pressure was immense. In 2014, everything clicked. 3 wins, 6 podiums, and a runner-up finish to Jorge Martin, who would later, of course, make his own history in MotoGP. But here's what made Mir different. While other riders had safety nets, Mir had none. "That's why I was taking it too serious from too young," he admitted. "I didn't have the opportunity to go to one team and pay, so I had to win in every championship." Mir's Moto3 career started with a harsh lesson in pressure. In 2015, his CEV championship campaign was a disaster of his own making. He was the fastest rider but couldn't find consistency. The pressure of knowing that failure meant the end of his dreams was crushing him. "It was not fun," Mir would later say about those early years. "The racing was not fun because it was so intense, but the progress, the day by day, going there, trying to improve, I love the progress." 2016 brought his first taste of World Championship success with a victory in Austria, but it was 2017 that announced Joan Mir as a future star. 10 wins from 18 races, 13 podiums, a championship won by 93 points, but even in victory, he could see the weight he carried. This wasn't celebration, this was relief. Relief that he'd earned the right to continue his dream for another year. Most riders spend years climbing through the categories. Mir had one season in Moto2 before Suzuki came calling. It was a massive gamble. Rookie seasons in MotoGP are notoriously difficult, and Mir was jumping straight from his single rookie Moto2 season. His 2018 Moto2 season showed promise. 4 podiums, 6th in the championship, and Rookie of the Year. But when Suzuki offered him a MotoGP seat, Mir faced the biggest decision of his career. "I said that I prefer to stay in Moto2 a lot of times," Mir admitted. "But the circumstances were like that, and we took a good chance, a good opportunity." 2019 was about survival and learning. 12th in the championship, no podiums, but something was building. Suzuki saw potential that others missed. They saw a rider who understood pressure, who knew how to extract performance from imperfect machinery. Then came 2020, the year that changed everything and nothing all at once. COVID had turned the world upside down. The MotoGP season was shortened, races were run without fans, and the entire paddock was operating under unprecedented circumstances. In this chaos, Joan Mir found his moment. But here's the thing about Mir's championship. It wasn't built on speed, it was built on something much rarer: consistency and intelligence. While Fabio Quartararo was winning races early in the season, Mir was quietly collecting podiums. 2nd place in Austria, 2nd in Emilia-Romagna, 2nd in Catalunya. He was always there, always scoring points, always in the hunt. The most remarkable statistic? Mir led the championship for weeks without winning a single race. In the modern era of MotoGP, this was unheard of. Champions win races. Champions dominate weekends. Champions don't sneak up on titles. But Mir was different. He understood that championships aren't won on Sunday. They're won by showing up every weekend and maximizing your result no matter what. When his first victory finally came at the European Grand Prix in Valencia, it felt inevitable. Not because he was the fastest, but because he'd earned it through sheer consistency and racecraft. Standing on that podium as world champion, Mir had achieved something that seemed impossible just years earlier. The kid who couldn't afford to pay for a ride had conquered the premier class of motorcycle racing. But here's where Joan Mir's story takes a heartbreaking turn. Success in MotoGP is fragile. The margins are so small that the difference between championship contention and fighting for points can be measured in tenths of seconds and millimeters of setup. 2021 started with promise. Mir was the defending champion, Suzuki had a competitive bike, and expectations were high. He managed 6 podiums and finished 3rd in the championship, a solid defense of his title. But 2022 brought the first signs of trouble. Suzuki's bike development stagnated while other manufacturers surged ahead. Mir managed just 87 points and finished 15th in the championship. The writing was on the wall. Then came the bombshell. Suzuki announced they were leaving MotoGP at the end of 2022. Mir, the reigning champion just 2 years earlier, was suddenly without a ride. Honda came calling, but this wasn't the Honda of Marc Marquez's dominant years. This was a Honda in crisis, struggling with a bike that was difficult to ride and even harder to win on. 2023 was a nightmare. 22nd in the championship, his best result was 5th place at the Indian Grand Prix. The same rider who had conquered MotoGP was now fighting just to score points. 2024 brought little improvement. He was 21st in the championship with just 21 points. Crashes, mechanical failures, and a bike that seemed to fight him every step of the way. As we're now well underway in 2025, Joan Mir finds himself in an almost impossible position. He's 27 years old, still in his prime, but riding machinery that makes him look ordinary. In recent interviews, you can hear the frustration in his voice, but also something else: determination. "I'm not a rider that enjoys just being here," Mir said recently. "I enjoy winning. I'm not proud to just compete. I'm a winner. I consider myself a winner." The question isn't whether Mir still has the talent, it's whether Honda can give him the tools to show it. Joan Mir's story is far from over, but it's already one of the most compelling in modern MotoGP. From a teenager who had to win just to survive, to an unlikely world champion, to a rider now fighting to prove he belongs at the top level. His 2020 championship will always be remembered as one of the most intelligent title campaigns in MotoGP history. But perhaps more importantly, his journey reminds us that in racing, as in life, success is never guaranteed, and the fall from the top can be swift and brutal. The question now is whether this is the end of Joan Mir's story at the top or simply the middle chapter of an even more remarkable comeback. Because if there's one thing we've learned about Joan Mir, it's that he's never been one to give up. And in a sport where careers can change in a single weekend, riding off a world champion might be the biggest mistake of all. What do you think? Can Joan Mir find his way back to the top, or has his moment passed? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the stories that make MotoGP the most compelling sport in the world.